Out of Compton. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. Charles Dickens' Tale of Two Cities. Hey Ma, I'll be right back. I'm gonna run to the liquor store around the corner. All right, baby, be careful. Always, you know me. With that, I headed for a routine stop to the neighborhood liquor store to pick up a few items I needed. As I was coming out of the store, I saw 8 niggas with bats, poles, and sticks running towards the entrance of the store. I stood there, looking around wondering who was about to get their ass kicked. Then it registered there wasn't anybody out there but me. Oh shit. I darted towards my car and jumped in before they could reach me, pushed the button to lock the doors and felt, momentarily at least, relieved. As I scrambled to find the ignition key, I suddenly heard a door open. I don't know how the motherfuckers got that front passenger door open. I could have sworn I locked it. Get that motherfucker, one of them shouted. Drag his ass out here. As one of the guys tried to grab me, I started kicking and swinging in a valiant yet vain attempt to keep the bloodthirsty wolves off me. Aw, fuck. I heard the car door behind me open, and I got clobbered in the back of the head with a pole. Punches rained down on me from all directions until one of them opened the driver's side door and pulled me out of the car. The last blow was with a bat across the side of my neck, which sent me crashing into a trash can. Semi-conscious, I heard one of them say, "Hurry up, let's get the fuck out of here before somebody calls the cops." My attackers took off running. As first pulled myself off the floor, I was literally seeing red from the warm blood that was streaming down my face and neck. My left eye was damn near shut closed. I was a bloody mess. I floundered back to my car, drove home, and stumbled into the house. Once, 14. Inside, I headed straight for my weapon stash, pulled out my .30 hunting rifle with an extra clip, and put. Before storming out of the door, I made a quick stop in the bathroom to wash off my face and neck. My injuries had become secondary to the desire for revenge that had completely taken over every ounce of my being. Those motherfuckers done fucked with the wrong one tonight, was all I could think. I knew precisely where one of the dudes lived, so I quietly pulled up in front of his family's house. The lights were all out. I was in Elmer Fudd mode. Shh, be very quiet. I rose. So the finger do the talking. Baka, 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 baka. The shots simultaneously shattered the previously quiet block, the windows, and door of the house. I continued blasting until the clip was empty. Baka, 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 baka. I quick changed clips and shot some more. Baka, 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 nearly emptying the second clip. When I finally stopped firing, the barrel of the gun was smoking. I put the pedal to the floor and sped off into the darkness. As my luck would have it, who did I see when I hit the corner? The brother of the guy I was looking for. Sorry nigga, but you're in the wrong fucking place at the absolute wrong fucking time. First jumped out of the car with the gun still smoking. Motherfucker, don't move bitch. The barrel of the rifle pointing directly between his eyes, hands raised. His younger brother pleaded, "Don't kill me. Don't kill me." I jumped out the car with the gun still smoking. Motherfucker, don't move bitch. The barrel of the rifle pointing directly between his eyes. My cousin Darlene ran from the inside of one of the crack houses we had on the block. She was from Grape Street, a well-known Crips set out of the Jordan Downs projects in Watts. Kill that motherfucker, was Darlene's ghetto advice, but there were too many witnesses, and my homies had trained me better than that. With the butt of the rifle, I bashed him in the head, knocking him back where he landed head first on the concrete. I moved in and started kicking him in the face. I guess from hearing all of the gunshots, a little crowd had gathered, including my boys Clyde, Gangster Ben, and Bubble Up. They were on that nigga like stink on shit. "What happened, big dog?" one of the homies asked, concerned about the blood that was still visible on my face, neck, and soaked into my shirt. "These niggas caught me up at the liquor store, beat me with bats and poles, all kinds of shit. Come on, dog, let's get you home." We hopped, 16, in my ride and boned out to my pad. When I got home, my sister began treating me. "Damn, you're fucked up. You need to go to the hospital." My sister did her best to stop the leaking and bandage me up. Then we rushed out of the house into the car and sped to Killer King Hospital. That was the shameful nickname that the Martin Luther King Jr. Hospital had earned back then. I made a few mistakes, but one would catch up with me. In our rush to get to the emergency room for medical attention, I forgot about cleaning the empty gun shell casings out of the car. Next thing I knew, a few hours later, while laying on an emergency room hospital bed, the police came in and booked me. VVV, welcome to my city, Compton, USA, and welcome to my world, the streets. Compton was the city my parents chose to raise their family, but the street life, that decision was all mine. I don't want to mistakenly or carelessly paint the picture that Compton was an ultra-violent community for everybody. In fact, back in the late 60s and 70s, Compton was a middle-class, family-oriented paradise for blacks. Before moving to Compton, our family lived in Watts, right across the street from Markham Middle School. Many people from Compton formerly lived 17 in Watts. Back then, moving to Compton from Watts was like George Jefferson moving on up from Harlem to a deluxe apartment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. It was a step up, even though the two cities are only about 3 miles away from each other. Our family received our lucky break when my pops and uncle went to Agua Caliente racetrack in Tijuana, Mexico. They picked 6 consecutive winning horses. My dad won $50,000 that day, which would be the equivalent of winning $1 million today. The phenomenon known as white flight is real, because once we moved, my dad won $50,000 that day, which would be the equivalent of winning $1 million today. The phenomenon known as white flight is real, because once we moved in that neighborhood, white families started fleeing like cockroaches when the lights come on. With parents, new cars, the Winnings, relocated, or from Watts bought a house in Compton and to Brand. When we moved on to our block in 1965, there weren't any other blacks in the neighborhood, and the white families that lived there wanted to keep it that way. That's when I observed firsthand how the phenomenon known as white flight is real. Once we moved into that neighborhood, white families started fleeing like cockroaches when the lights come on. My mother was a dedicated housewife whose family came from Dallas, Texas. I remember one day, 18, my mother and I were returning home with a shopping cart from Kohl's Market, the local grocery store. A carload of big white dudes pulled up in a '56 Chevy and started screaming out of the window, "Niggers, niggers, get the fuck out." That shit scared me too. Death. I couldn't have been more than 5 years old. My mom's looked at me with a stern but confident look in her eyes. Her hand was in her purse as she said, "Don't worry about them." My mother certainly wasn't worried because she made sure she protected her kids at all times. Another early memory I have was in 1968. My mother and I were driving on one of her errands, listening to the radio when the program was interrupted. CBS News bulletin just in. Civil rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King was shot at a downtown Memphis hotel. I could see tears begin to swell up in her eyes. "What's wrong, Mama?" I didn't fully comprehend the gravity of the situation reported. But Mama knew, and she started to weep. "They killed Martin Luther King." I hadn't seen my mother cry before, so that's when I knew the shit was serious. My dad was a former Marine and a strict disciplinarian who taught us good principles. My father's family is originally from Homestead, Virginia. We can trace our lineage directly to Nat Turner, 1831, the famous freedom fighter who led one of the most successful slave rebellions in U.S. history. It gives. Not many people can say that Nat Turner is their great-great-great descendant. In fact, I can arguably say that I'm the hardest motherfucker in my family since Nat Turner. Me a great sense of pride to know that I come from one hell of a bloodline. Not many people can say that Nat Turner is their great-great-great direct descendant. In fact, I can arguably say that I'm the hardest motherfucker in my family since Nat Turner. My grandmother, who was the backbone of our family, may have been my closest competition. I remember one day my grandma called me asking questions. I told her I didn't have the answers to the questions she was asking. My grandmother got to going off and cursing a little bit. I was like, "Grandma, I'm cool. I'm going to go on and get off the line. I'm not going to hang up in your face, but I'm going to get off the line." That day, I happened to get a nice-sized shipment, so I had my whole crew on the porch. We were over at the house on Burris Lane so we could distribute the product. About 10 minutes after hanging up the phone, I saw Grandma pulling up. I was planning on leaving before she got there because I knew she was coming. 20. But before I could leave, she pulled up. She lived off of ND and Broadway over in Deuce Hood. She had to be doing 90 miles per hour to get over there that fast, which just about matched her age at the time. When she pulled up, Grandma's anger and adrenaline were flowing so hard she jumped out, didn't even use her walker, and came up on the porch. I was sitting on the porch with about 10 homies. She had $300 in her left hand, and her right fist was balled up. She reared back and socked me in the nose, right in front of everybody, letting everybody know I'll still whip this nigger's ass. She punked me, then threw the $300 in my face. "Nigga, you think you're better than everybody because you got 2 pennies more than everybody. You're going in the dirt just like everybody else, motherfucker." Before she left, she whipped out her black old school .38 revolver and made it clear, "Nigga, I'll kill you." She gave me a pass by not shooting my ass. She pulled off the curb and made a U-turn when my brother yelled she fixing to do a drive-by. All of us hit the ground. She punked us. The next morning, she called me for breakfast and apologized. She told me she didn't mean to do me like that. My parents moved to California once my dad was assigned to Camp Pendleton in Oceanside, California. There were 12 of us children, 6 boys and 6 girls. 2 of my brothers passed away. My oldest brother Thurman died from leukemia, a form of cancer, in 1971. My brother Mike, who was 2 years older than me and doubled as my best friend, got shot and died in the streets of Compton in 1990s. Lil Dog is my little brother who is 4 years younger than me and followed in my footsteps. In 1980s, when I was 15 years old, my mother died from colon cancer, the same shit I developed and almost died from in 2014. Lucky for me. During an annual visit to my doctor for a physical, my doctor asked, "Are you feeling all right?" He had a look of concern. "Yeah, I'm good." "You sure?" he asked with a doubtful look on his face. "Yeah, I feel normal." He looked down at my blood work results for a few minutes, assessing my extremely low blood level. We left his office immediately, walking directly across the street into the hospital emergency room. I spent 35 days in the hospital because my blood level was half what it should have been. Instead of 14 points of blood, my blood level was more than 7 pints low. While I was in the hospital, they fed me intravenously due to the blood transfusions I was receiving. This meant I wasn't able to eat solid food for 17 days. That shit didn't work for me because I would get hungry as a bear cat when the 22 nurses weren't looking. I would steal juices off the food carts because they weren't giving me anything to drink. My fluid intake was restricted to sucking on ice. I went into the hospital weighing 238 pounds and left weighing 190. One day, my family came to visit me in the hospital, and the nurse put me on blast. She was like, "Do you know your son and your brothers has been in here stealing juices off the cart? He doesn't know it, but we have cameras." Aw shit. I'd been stealing juices for more than a week, but they finally caught on. That food cart would come around and I'd run up there with the IV still in my arm. On another day, my sister came to visit with my 2 nieces, my grandson, and my wife. A siren went off, and I heard a nurse say, "Code red." To me, code. Contrary to popular myth, the majority of the young men that started Crips and Bloods in Compton had mothers and fathers in their lives. Red meant somebody had died or was dying. 30 minutes later, another code red went off, so I got out of my bed, and I was feeling bad that day, and I shut the motherfucking door. My sister was like, "Why you shut the door?" I said, "The Reaper is out there, and he's busy. He ain't coming in, this motherfucker." They started cracking up laughing. My sister said, "You got the Lord with you. You don't have to worry about no damn Reaper." Eventually, the doctors operated on me, took out my big and small intestines, and stapled me back together with 25 staples in my stomach. If my doctor hadn't acted so quickly, it could have been over for me. I watched Big Ang from the Mob Wives go through a similar battle and die, which was some sad shit to see. My cancer is currently in remission. Fortunately, the doctors were able to remove the tumor while it was still in the opening stage before the first stage. The CAT scans have been coming back normal ever since. My cancer doctor told me I was cancer-free, but he warned me that this is the 5-year period where I have to get scans every 6 months and a colonoscopy every year. This shit is scary, and it's been a long journey. The Lord has been with me through it all. Despite my mother's passing, my father held our family down for over 20 years by himself. Then he finally remarried. Back in the 60s and early 70s, most black families had both a mother and father in the house. Besides my parents, other members of their family also migrated to California in the late 50s along with scores of other African-American families. Eventually, our whole street was full of black families. Contrary to popular myth, the majority of young, 24 men that started Crips and Bloods in Compton had mothers and fathers in the home and in their lives. Single-parent households didn't jump off in Compton until the late 70s. Back then, parents instilled morals and values into their kids, and there wasn't such a thing as child abuse. For the first 14 years of my life, our family attended church regularly. You would get your ass wore out if you misbehaved. The principal at the school was even empowered to whip your ass if you misbehaved. Gang members back then had to be undercover. You might be big and bad on the streets, but when you got home, you changed up because mom and dad were in the house and they didn't play. These new street dudes are growing up in homes without both parents. That's why they're all fucked up and don't have any respect. Growing up, we also didn't have a lot of gang violence with Mexicans. In fact, we did business with them. Before I went to the feds in 1998, the blacks had the dope sacks. By the time I got out of the feds, the Mexicans had the sacks. They roll around Compton, looking like brothers used to look, even. Their senoritas roll around in nice cars. That used to be how blacks headed in Compton. VVV. Several factors influenced my decision to get involved with the street life. Back in the late 60s and early 70s, it was a fad that a lot of kids were getting involved with. Street life was a way for young blacks to protect ourselves and our communities from anybody who wanted to mess with us. By 1969, 1970s, gangs were growing super fast and super big, and I wasn't interested in being an outsider. Our neighborhood, Southside Crips, started in 1971. Our area is bordered by Long Beach Boulevard to Alameda, Compton Boulevard to Greenleaf. We were initially known as the U.S. Boys. There were a couple of incidents with the Pirus Bloods in the area that motivated the original U.S. Boys to convert and become Crips. The Crips were the most dominant gang popping off back then. To this day, there's a bunch of Crip sets in Compton: Santana Block, Southside, Nutty Block, Spooktown, Carver Block. There's a lot of them. I don't know what the incident was that set things off for the older guys, but there was an incident that I experienced. A few of us youngsters, 9 and 10-year-olds, rode our bikes to the Pep Boys on Long Beach Boulevard. When we got to Palmer Street, we ran into some looters, park, blood niggas, Little George, Willie T, bartender, and Herman Jr. They were all older than us. We were riding in the street, and cars were coming behind us. So when we saw them, we couldn't turn around. Once they saw us, they started chasing us. Willie T caught up to me, socked me in the nose, and took my bike. I never forgot that shit. During another incident, once again, I was with some of my friends, Uchi and Stevie Johnson, the little brother of the Boston Celtics' Dennis Johnson. We went to the Compton College pool, where everybody used to go swimming. While we were swimming, about 30 bald-headed Crips came up to the pool and chased everybody out. One of the dudes, Sweet Tooth, was an original us boy, but he turned Crip. He pointed at us and said, "Those are little us." Boys, you should have seen how fast we ran out that motherfucker. We were just 9 and 10 years old. They were all 16, 17, and 18 years old. Even though I was too young to be in the U.S. Boys, I was there when the neighborhood converted over to become Crips. Once again, I and some of my friends were within earshot when a group of the U.S. Boys, including a few of my big brothers, were having a conversation about an apparent beef they had with some Pirus Bloods. They were pissed about something. Be up there around 4 or 5. One of the homies barked, "Mac Thomas, Bruno, Head Honcho, and some of the Grandee Crips are going to meet us up at Emerson." The invitation wasn't for us. We were too young to be in their business like that. But we went to Emerson anyway, following the older, 27, dudes, Crips from the Grandees, one of the original Crip gangs, showed up and put us on. It wasn't a hostile takeover. It was more like a merger, where everybody who was part of us boys became Crips to give us a competitive advantage. After the conversion, a few dice games got started. It was my first official night as a Crip, and I happened to be shaking the dice when my pops came driving by and saw me. "Hey, what are you doing?" I didn't even have to look. I knew my dad's unmistakable voice when I heard it. I walked up to the car. Nothing. Just shooting dice. Not no more. Bring your ass on and get in this car. I don't want you out there, you understand me? I hopped in the passenger seat. Yes, sir. I looked down as we pulled off to hide. My embarrassment. I don't give you money to do it like that. Little did he know his 9-year-old son, as well as 3 of his older sons, had just become original Compton Crips. He took me back to the house and gave me a good old-fashioned pull-your-pants-down belt whipping. That was back when you could still get a whipping from your parents, back when the police would take you home so your parents would whip your ass. Although I didn't get to finish the dice game, I've been repping Southside Crip to the fullest. I learned a few valuable lessons as a youngster around dice games. One time when I was in the 8th grade, we were at this party shooting dice, and one of the dudes felt I cheated him. So he tried to steal. First whipped out my little .25 and pointed it at him. The guy's brother was there and whipped out a bigger strap than me, a .45. We had all grew up together, so once the smoke cleared about 20 minutes later, we came to an agreement. The older brother told me, "Little dog, let me teach you a lesson. Don't ever pull no gun without using it. At least hit a nigga with it in the head a couple of times if you pull it out." That was important advice that I learned from and took to heart. One ironic relationship I had growing up was with the infamous Marion Shuge Knight. I've known Shuge since I was 9 years old. He and I played Pop Warner football together for the greater Compton Colts and the Compton Wolves back when we were 11 and 12 years old. He played on the offensive line as the center, and I was the running back and strong safety, the hardest and fastest guy on the team. I earned the nickname, the Assassin, after Oakland Raider all-pro safety, Jack Tatum, Shuge's cousins. Ronald and Donald also played with us. Both of them played tight end. Almost all of the guys on our team were Crips except Shuge and his cousins, Shuge's dad. Team, same, the on, played, first in Shuge, when, day the in, back. Who was the original Shuge was one of our coaches, and this other man named Billingsley was the head coach. Shuge's family owned a diesel truck company, so they were living that middle-class lifestyle, driving nice vans and Cadillacs. When we'd win a game, his dad would invite the team over to their house too. Swim, eat hot dogs, potato chips, and punch. Shuge was my dog. One longtime friend of mine was a guy named Bubble Up. As a young dude, 17 or 18 years old, he was one of the richest young niggas in Compton. When we were back in high school, before the drug game got real big, people used to hijack trucks carrying cigarettes and other merchandise. Bubble Up was one of the best at doing it, catching a truck at least once a month. He had a Mexican fence out in Santa Fe Springs that used to give him $180,000 per truck. I think Bubble Up single-handedly contributed to the creation of the LoJack anti-theft system, because, after a while, they started putting LoJacks on them. Motherfuckers. One of my best friends growing up was Uchi. I've known him since 1965, and we were always together. We didn't go to grade school together, but he lived 2 streets from me. His dad was also a football coach. He was about my size, but was younger than us, so he played with the younger guys. Another one of my friends growing up was a 31, straight out of Compton, pretty boy. I'm gonna call C-Ray. He knew all the street players and pimps, Pimpin' Ken, Don Juan, good game. He liked to be around them. He came from a pretty well-off family. His mother worked for Mobil, and his dad worked for Boeing, which was called MC Donald Douglas back then. All the rest of us went to rough-ass Emerson Elementary. C-Ray went to Catholic school. He was my little homie and became one of my best salesmen once we were fully enrolled in Sidewalk University. We got into the drug game and started moving significant weight. Sidewalk University